I can see something is troubling you, my child.
It's just so overwhelming.
Share your burden. That's why I'm here.
Some spiritual leaders don't control people with force. They control them with meaning.
Sister, the Lord is calling you. Stand firm in the aisle. He has chosen you for this moment. Do not turn away.
And by the time followers realize what's happening, they feel like they cannot leave. Not because they're chained, but because they are convinced their destiny is tied to one person. That is how dependency begins. Across many churches, revival movements, and spiritual communities, charismatic leadership is powerful. In fact, many healthy movements are built on it. But when charisma replaces accountability, something else begins to form. And it forms quietly. She didn't realize she was losing her husband. She thought she was being faithful. She thought she was being obedient.
My brothers and sisters, the time for awakening is now. We must rise in faith and unity to embrace our calling.
She thought God had finally chosen her, set her apart from everyone else in that room. And by the time she understood what had actually been happening, her marriage was already over. This is not a story about a bad marriage. It is a story about what happens when devotion to a person gets confused with devotion to God. And it happens far more often than anyone in the church will admit. For privacy, we'll call her Oma. Oma was married for 8 years, 2 children, active in church, respected in her community. She wasn't looking for power. She wasn't chasing attention. She simply walked into a revival meeting one evening because she wanted to feel closer to God. You see, that's how most of these stories begin. Not with weakness, not with desperation, but with a genuine, sincere desire to grow. So ask yourself, how many people do you know who started that same way? How many walked into a spiritual system with nothing but open hands and came out unable to leave? The first thing he did was single her out. In the middle of a packed service, he stopped, looked in her direction, and said, "You carry something rare. I see leadership on you." She said she had never felt that scene before in her life. And that right there, that moment, is where we need to stop. Because what just happened wasn't just encouragement. Public affirmation from someone in authority doesn't just make you feel good. It rewires how you see yourself. It plants a new identity, chosen, elevated, special, and it does it in front of witnesses, so it feels confirmed by God and by community at the same time. So I want to ask you something honestly. If someone with spiritual authority singled you out publicly, told you God had marked you for something greater, would your first instinct be to question it? Or would part of you, quietly, privately, want it to be true? That's not a weakness. That's being human. But it is exactly where the door opens. A few weeks after the elevation came the warning. Oma said he pulled her aside after service and told her, "There is resistance in your home. Someone close to you is blocking your spiritual growth." Now, her husband had never been hostile, never been abusive, never prevented her from going to church, not once. But suddenly, she began looking at him differently. And so this is the part one need you to understand, because it is not dramatic. It doesn't happen loudly. It happens in small, quiet thoughts. He doesn't get it. He can't see what God is doing in me. He's holding me back. That's the psychological shift. When a trusted authority suggests that the people who love you most are actually your obstacles, trust doesn't break. It just tilts. Slowly. In a new direction. What happens when devotion to a leader begins to feel more important than devotion to your spouse? That is not all. After the elevation and the threat came something that looked, on the surface, like honor. Private sessions. He told her not everyone would understand what God was doing with her. That she needed special guidance, protection, access. And so the private meetings began. Regular. Frequent. Her husband noticed. Asked questions.
I need to tell you something important. Please, just listen.
She defended the leader. Told her husband he simply didn't understand spiritual matters. You see, this is the structure. And I want you to see it clearly, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. Elevation. Threat. Exclusive access. Isolation. It doesn't require a villain to work. It doesn't require abuse or coercion. The structure itself produces the result. And here's the harder question: at what point does spiritual mentorship become emotional replacement? Oma started confiding in the leader more than in her husband. Family decisions, parenting decisions, financial decisions, relational decisions. She began consulting him first. Her husband became someone she reported to, not someone she partnered with. Her husband asked questions. She told him he lacked faith. She said he was spiritually insecure. And so dependency doesn't destroy marriages overnight. It doesn't announce itself. It simply reallocates authority, slowly, quietly, until one day the person beside you realizes they've become a stranger in their own home. Let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable. When you face a major decision, who do you call first? Your spouse or your spiritual authority? Because that answer reveals more about your primary loyalty than almost anything else. One day, Omo's husband sat her down. And he said, "I feel like I'm competing with your pastor." That sentence should have broken something open immediately. And it did, but not in the way you'd expect. She dismissed it. She walked away believing she was simply protecting her destiny, standing firm in her calling, refusing to let an unsupportive spouse dim what God had placed in her. And here is the truth that is hardest to hear. Dependency doesn't feel like dependency while it's happening. It feels like loyalty. It feels like obedience. It feels spiritual, righteous, necessary. Which is exactly what makes it so difficult to see from the inside. Her husband left. He said he couldn't continue competing with someone who had positioned himself as the spiritual authority over their home. And Oma, even then, didn't blame the system. She blamed his weakness. Months passed. Distance brought clarity. Slowly, the leader's attention began to shift. The private sessions became less frequent. The exclusive access moved to someone else. The special elevation she had felt faded. And in that fading, she saw something that broke her. It had always been conditional. And so when dependency collapses, and it does collapse, it doesn't leave gracefully. It leaves damage behind. Now I want to step back from Oma for a moment. Because what happened to her was not about one manipulative man. I want to be careful here, because some of these leaders genuinely believe they are doing God's work. This is about a structure. A system that, even without malicious intent, produces a predictable outcome. Charismatic systems are built on emotional intensity. And emotional intensity bonds people faster than rational reflection ever could. You feel something powerful in that room, you feel seen, chosen, connected, and your brain codes that feeling as truth. And so I need you to sit with these questions. Don't answer them quickly. Have you ever confused emotional intensity with spiritual depth? Have you ever taken exclusivity as evidence of calling? Have you ever dismissed or minimized someone you love because they question your spiritual authority? Not all charismatic leadership is dangerous. Let's be honest about that. But here is how you tell the difference. Healthy leadership invites questions. It encourages unity in your home. It defers to your marriage covenant. It welcomes accountability and oversight from other leaders. Unhealthy leadership centralizes influence around one person. It discourages dissent, sometimes by labeling questions as lack of faith. It positions itself as indispensable. It makes you feel that to live would cost you something divine. And so here is the question I want you to answer honestly. Who corrects your leader? Who reviews their decisions? Who has the standing to challenge them publicly and would be heard? If the answer is no one, that is not spiritual authority. That is unchecked power. And unchecked power, over time, always finds a way to cost someone something. When I asked Oma what she would tell herself if she could go back, she said, "I thought I was protecting my future. I didn't realize I was dismantling my present. If I had stepped back even a year earlier, I might still be married." And so now I want to speak to you directly. Not about Oma. About you. I want you to answer these questions as honestly as you can, not for me, but for yourself. Have you ever felt that leaving your leader would somehow endanger your destiny? Have you ever hidden conversations with a spiritual authority from your spouse or felt like you needed to? Do you believe your leader has influence over major decisions in your household? Would you feel fear, genuine fear, at the thought of walking away? If you answered yes to more than one of those questions, you may not simply be inspired. You may be dependent. And that is not a judgment. That is not condemnation. But dependency does not always look extreme from the inside. It feels normal. It feels right. Its consequences, though, marriages fracturing, friendships dissolving, autonomy slowly disappearing, those feel very real. Faith should strengthen your home, not compete with it. Real leadership equips your marriage. It doesn't rival it. And devotion, true devotion, should never require you to pull away from the people who have loved you the longest. Oma's story is not rare. It is simply hidden. Most people who are living it right now do not know they are living it. And awareness, just awareness, is where protection begins.